Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second to last meeting as part of the study on freshwater policy. Excuse me, in Canada. Before we start, just for the benefit of the witnesses who are here in person, and I think all the witnesses are here in person today. We've been dealing with issues around feedback and the impact on interpreters. So the House has instituted a new protocol, which is that you should stay away, separate the earpiece and the microphone a good distance so that there's no feedback. And if you're not using your earpiece, if you could put it face down on this coaster-like sticker that is on the desk, so that there will be no feedback. Well, that having been said, welcome to our witnesses, and welcome especially to Mr. Donnelly, who was an inhabitant of this place for a while, and someone with whom I had the pleasure of working, and was well known as a very collegial member of Parliament that everyone appreciated. So we'll start with you, Mr. Donnelly, for 5 minutes, and then we'll go to Mr. Jacques from the Water Security Agency of British Columbia. So go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Great to be here. I'm also joined with James Mack, ADM for Waterland and Resource Stewardship. Good afternoon. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. I'm Finn Donnelly, BC's first Parliamentary Secretary for Watershed Restoration with the Ministry of Land, Water, Resource Stewardship and the MLA for Coquitlam Burke Mountain. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee as a representative of British Columbia and to discuss a matter that lies at the heart of my life's work, fresh water and the protection and restoration and stewardship of watersheds. Growing up on the banks of BC's longest river, the mighty Fraser, I developed an intrinsic connection to its waters. It led me to swimming the 1,400-kilometer length of the river twice, in 1995 and again in 2000. That was pre-politics. To draw attention to its declining health and encourage communities to better steward the river. The experience not only strengthened my resolve to safeguard our waterways, but it inspired me to found the Rivershed Society of BC in 1996 with a focus on the importance of water to British Columbians. My advocacy my work led me to politics, first in local government, then as a member of Parliament, and now as an MLA in British Columbia. It's become apparent that British Columbians share my view that clean, fresh, abundant water is critical for our province's success. Healthy watersheds are foundational to social, environmental, and economic systems supporting BC. Water powers our economy and is critical to support our food, fish, and our drinking water. BC's watershed sector contributes over $5 billion to the province's GDP and supports 75,000 jobs. Watersheds play an essential role in constructing homes needed to support jobs and workers. Access to water sources determine where our communities can flourish and thrive. All animals, especially wild salmon, rely on clean, cold, abundant fresh water to survive. Water is one of our greatest allies in the face of climate change. Healthy watersheds function as resilient buffers that reduce, even prevent the impacts and costs related to floods, droughts, and wildfires. The severity of last summer's droughts and wildfires in BC and the potential for drought and wildfire this summer demonstrate the need for early investment and watershed resiliency, restoration, rebuilding, and infrastructure initiatives. That's why BC has taken action to co-develop its first ever watershed security strategy with First Nations and establish a $100 million watershed security fund to support work needed to improve outcomes for our watersheds. Co-development of the strategy has occurred predominantly through BC First Nations Water Table, but ongoing relationships have made been made with First Nations leadership, modern-day treaty nations, and existing government-to-government tables. As seen through BC and Canada's joint efforts on the co-funded BC Salmon Restoration and Innovation Fund, BC and the Government of Canada both recognize the importance of keeping watersheds healthy for people, local economies, and ecosystems. Since 2019, our governments have provided $285 million in support of projects to protect wild salmon. We have made important progress together, but without continued efforts to improve watershed security, our watersheds are at risk from drought, floods, fires, climate change, urban development, and industrial uses. BC's watershed security strategy is responsive to these pressures and will shape the future of watersheds and watershed management. But more support for this work is needed to achieve our shared goals. The current $100 million Watershed Security Fund must grow to meet the scale of water challenges facing British Columbia. Current estimates suggest a minimum of $1 billion is required to support strategic investments in infrastructure, recovery, and watershed resilience. Federal funding is needed to support the investment work already being led by the province and First Nations. A commitment of federal contribution over 10 years is another opportunity for Canada and BC to work together through the watershed security strategy to support sustained strategic transformational action in BC. In closing, I ask that this committee recommend the federal government join British Columbia in investing in initiatives like the Watershed Security Strategy and Fund to lay the groundwork for a more resilient and prosperous future. Thank you again for inviting me here to this important study.
Merci, Monsieur Donnelly,
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. I'd like to thank you as a former parliamentarian and as a current parliamentarian in British Columbia. You must respect the time that is allotted, and you did that. So thank you very much. Before moving on, I'd like to welcome Mr. Généreux, who is replacing Mr. Deltel. Now we'll move on to Mr. Sean Jacques, who is the President and CEO of Water Security Agency. He is accompanied by David Cooper, the Vice President of Agriculture Services and Economic Development. Mr. Jacques, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
And thank you for inviting me myself back to the committee and for allowing us to appear again. Today I'd like to build on my previous remarks to reinforce the importance that responsible water management, which is sustainable, adaptable, and reliable, is not only clearly good for Saskatchewan communities, producers, and industry, but it is also beneficial for habitat, aquatic species, and the environment. Saskatchewan is home to an estimated over 110,000 lakes and rivers, representing some of the most abundant fresh water resources in North America. The Water Security Agency plays a critical role in managing our abundant water resources through proactive operation of Saskatchewan's network of 74 dams and hundreds of kilometers of conveyance channels. We oversee more than 600 drinking water and more than 800 wastewater facilities, and Water Security Agency scientists also study and analyze wildlife and plant life. WSA carries out water testing and sampling to help understand and track the quality and quantity of water. Last year, WSA gathered over 500 water quality samples in lakes and rivers across the province. And this year marks the 20th anniversary of WSA managing water levels at Lake Diefenbaker to help protect the endangered piping plover. Since 2014, we have seen a rise in the number of plover hatchlings to reach maturity by over 550%, and nesting sites are up almost 150% in the same time span. We take the health of habitat and water quality very seriously, with investments and studies to back it up. Many of you will know agriculture is the backbone of Saskatchewan's economy, and that we are Canada's leading exporter of almost all agriculture products. What you may not know is our province is home to some of the most environmentally sustainable products in the world. Our no-till and zero-till practices and lower fertilizer applications are responsible for Saskatchewan farmers having a carbon footprint 95% lower than competitive jurisdictions around the world. Our producers are the best stewards of the land and have been for over 100 years. It is our livelihood, and so we must be. It is amazing to consider that Saskatchewan has half of Canada's arable acres, And based on our recent studies, we now know that 86% of the wetlands in our province are undrained. And there is room to develop in a sustainable way to gain benefits of agriculture water management, which includes economic growth, gained efficiencies, and improved soil health, and we are working on a stewardship policy to do just that. This is something no other jurisdiction in Canada has done before. And over the last year and a half, WSA has engaged a total of 80 stakeholder organizations and First Nation and Métis communities in the creation of this stewardship policy. And with input from engagement and learning from our practical demonstration and research projects, WSA is developing a policy that will support our producers, allowing for economic growth while protecting our environment. And this is very important work because sustainable production of food will be needed. Earlier this year, the province of Saskatchewan announced it's moving forward with the first 90,000 acres of the larger Lake Diefenbaker irrigation projects. Irrigation also acts as one of the simplest and best adaptation measures against varying climate conditions. It helps us be more resilient and sustainable both during flood and drought situations. What if this project not only contributed to the economy while helping adapt to a changing climate, but then lowered emissions? Building on the success of Saskatchewan's dryland farming, expanding irrigation promises additional economic and climate change benefits. The Lake Diefenbaker irrigation project will produce over 297 million kilograms more food per year. And based on our initial research, irrigated crop acres will be 16% less emissions intensive than our already carbon efficient dryland crops. That means the amount of crop produced in the entire Lake Diefenbaker irrigation project would be grown with 126,000 tons of fewer emissions per year than had the equivalent amount been grown on dryland conditions. And so over 20 years, the project will account for over 2.5 million tons of avoided emissions. That is why we think this project needs your attention, and we're going to be producing more crops on the same land base with fewer emissions per ton of crop produced. Based on what we know, this project helps economic growth while lowering emissions. It is something that we would ask each of you to support the federal government in being a partner. In closing, I would like to say that responsible freshwater management holds immense potential for Canada with strengthened food security, climate resilience, water sustainability, and lasting economic benefits. And I believe we are doing just that in Saskatchewan. So thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Jacques, et on se tourne.
Thank you, Mr. Jacques. On to Mr. Crum, who will start the question period.
Mr. Chair, and it's for 6 minutes, Mr. Chair? Okay. I'll start with the representatives from the Saskatchewan Water Security Agency. So if I understand your position correctly, the government of Saskatchewan is in favor of the creation of the Canada Water Agency, subject to some of the particulars about its actual mandate. Can I just get from clarity from the witnesses on that?
We do support the creation of the Canada Water Agency. If it doesn't have a role as a regulator, it's something our province has been, adamant from day one. So we believe like maintaining provincial autonomy over water management is key for Saskatchewan, and I know a number of our neighboring provinces have, the same view. We have expressed our concerns in the past that if the agency was created, as long as a duplication of services that provinces are already doing. But a support-focused Canada Water Agency could have many benefits, not only to Saskatchewan but other provinces in Canada, much like the PFRA did many years ago. It could create the ability to collaborate on major water projects, cost-sharing opportunities, similar to what PFRA did many years ago with building a lot of the structures across our province. Also, information and knowledge sharing as well. So I think those are some of the benefits that could be realized with the agency, but we don't see a need for it to have a regulatory role as we're already doing that.
And has the federal government reached out to the Saskatchewan Water Security Agency to have a formal consultation process regarding the agency's mandate?
We've had some meetings with the federal government over that as they're navigating, setting up the agency, and we've been communicating some of our concerns. In fact, later this week, I have another meeting with Environment Canada on that as well.
Just to be clear, when it comes to the cost-sharing opportunities, is it safe to say that the Lake Diefenbaker project is at the top of the wish list for the government of Saskatchewan?
Yes, it's, I've explained some of the benefits, what we see the benefits of the Lake Diefenbaker irrigation project. And, it's a generational project. It's going to be there for, decades. And there's also a significant benefit of that project to the federal government as well as the province. And so, that's why we believe there is room for a federal partner in building out this project.
And can you speak to any similar opportunities? Are there any other major irrigation projects on the drawing board, so to speak, either in Saskatchewan or in other provinces that you're aware of?
Yeah, I'll maybe also get David to jump in here as well. But we look for opportunities in the expansion of irrigation in other parts of the province, not just around Lake Diefenbaker. And so there are.
Yeah, I would maybe add, thank you for the question, that in addition to the West Side project that we've profiled, there are other significant developments that are under contemplation that would also require significant capital. And so, the West Side project is definitely top of our heap, but we are engaged with other irrigation districts looking at opportunities, and those would come with significant costs as well. And so, echoing kind of Sean's previous comments, an opportunity to secure a federal grant would be a huge push forward for those projects, because carrying them from the provincial and producer level alone can be a tall ask, because these projects do have a large upfront cost, and obviously they provide benefit for many years, but that initial build out is quite costly.
And can you speak to any climate adaptation initiatives or policies that the provincial government has, either in the form of the Lake Diefenbaker project or in other projects or initiatives?
I'll start, and then David can add any comments. So, Lake Diefenbaker in itself, I think, is supporting that. It's a large storage reservoir. It holds 9.5 million, or just about 8 million acre feet of water. It's a very large man-made reservoir. So we use it, to capture and store water on years when there's excess precipitation or excess water flowing on the Saskatchewan River. And then we use the reservoir for irrigating or providing water to communities in years when there's a lack of precipitation. In the last few years, we saw that in our province where there was a need for that, for that extra water. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I would maybe add a little bit. Lake Diefenbaker truly is unique in the lack of development that has occurred with respect to the water that is available there. And this has been studied by academics in Saskatchewan. Dr. John Pomeroy, obviously, I think he's appeared before the committee, is one of those that we've heard from on this matter. And his research has shown that he's forecasting a 20% increase in inflows into the lake over the future. And so that's in addition to the water that, through our assessment, we believe is available for development right now. So it truly is a very underdeveloped opportunity. And when you look at the challenges that we see in terms of reliable precipitation, timely precipitation, obviously irrigation can address those concerns. So it truly is a great opportunity, and I think we're doing our best to tell the story as broadly as we can, because it's something that really should be brought forward for not just Saskatchewan, but we believe for Canada's interest as well.
So if I may add also, Mr. Cram, that when the lake was created back in the 60s, it was 500,000 acres of irrigation was the vision, and we're currently at 145,000 acres. We've only achieved 20% of that vision, so there is a lot more room for growth.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Ali now for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, thank you to all witnesses for being here today. Mr. Donnelly, thank you for sharing that story, for swimming that river and your love for the river and the bank. It's really important. Water, I see that water is a life. That's how I put it in one word. If I have to put water, importance of the water, I would say it's a life. Without water, there's no life. So in your view, what role do you believe that Canada Water Agency can have in British Columbia's context?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Ali. I do appreciate those comments. And water is critical. It was critical to me in my early development 30 years ago. And it's become even more so now as we've seen the pressures mounting on water. And I think the Canada Water Agency is very needed. It can play an important function for bringing provinces and territories together to focus on the challenges that lie ahead, which are enormous. I think the science and the monitoring that it can bring attention to is critical. And I know the agency has reached out to our government and is looking for partnerships and ways that our governments can work together, which I think is critically important. If there's one thing or two things that I could stress, one I already did in my presentation in terms of looking at further investments, I think those investments are absolutely needed. I would encourage Canada to consider a broader view of the impacts on water or focus on addressing water. Drinking water is critically important to all Canadians and the Canadian economy. But so are the impacts from drought, floods, wildfires, and they need to be addressed. And that, I believe, will take an all-of-government approach. So from multiple ministries to engage in how that is addressed. So further investment is needed, and a slightly broader agenda as we have taken in the province. And maybe I'd ask ADM Mac if there's anything else that I've missed.
No, I think, well, I
Okay,
just,
yeah. No, thank you. It's my
right.
time is running out. As we all know, climate change is having a significant impact on our freshwater resources. Can you discuss the importance of emissions reduction efforts and BC's approach to protecting freshwater resources, please?
Thank you. And I'll jump in really quickly and maybe let James add to that, because I think the two are critically linked. And I think you can actually get to solutions by focusing on water, encouraging everyone, because the impact on climate affects all economies and all sectors. So from housing to transportation, all industries, or many industries, certainly in British Columbia, require water, some more than others. Agriculture, mining, oil and gas, all require water. And those put pressures, if there's too much coming from one sector, on other sectors. So, abundant flows are critical. And that, as we see receding glaciers and impacts with groundwater and surface water supplies, those are going to be critical that we figure those out. We've been working closely with our agriculture community, cattlemen, dairy, and others to address these concerns. So it's going to take everyone working together on that. James?
I would just add that for BC, we have started with an ambitious approach on mitigating climate change. So we have a Clean BC strategy that we're well in implementation on, and that's definitely, for the province, a first step is to take serious action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There is a climate preparedness and adaptation strategy, which has been in place now for years with significant funding. A key element about that is rethinking water and how we manage water. So I just flag a few specifics. One is our emergency management ministry is now emergency management climate readiness. So when the parliamentary secretary talks about flood and drought and wildfire, these are increasingly being thought of as climate emergencies, and so the responses change. And then secondly, our ministry, the parliamentary secretary noted he's our first PS for watershed restoration. We now have a ministry of water land resource stewardship. So we have a provincial minister who is the political leader for the province on water. In our submission for the Canada Water Agency, we actually thought that would be a useful partner, a whole of government approach on policy for water with an ability to give funding as partnerships so that we can get to work. In BC, it's impossible for the province to act alone. We need farmers, ranchers, First Nations, large industries, and the federal government. So we just can't have individual programs anymore operating in silos. We need a partner that comes
Okay.
in a collaborative way.
Merci. Madame Posey.
Oui, alors, merci.
Thank you, on to Ms. Posey. Thank you to the witnesses for coming all the way here. Mr. Ali asked a question to Mr. Donnelly. That is the question that I myself wanted to ask. And so I will ask Mr. Sean Jacques to answer the same question. In your opening remarks, you talked about agriculture. I'll let you expand on your reflections. I think that you were looking for the correct channel for interpretation. Is all good?
Question?
Oui, bien sûr. Alors,
Yes, I'll repeat. In your opening remarks, you said you talked a lot about agriculture, irrigation of lands, and of course, water is important for agriculture, but it is also important just for us. Our bodies are composed of water mostly. 2/3 of it is water, and so yes, water is an essential service as well. The climate is warming up, and we know its consequences, and we also know the causes of climate change. In a province such as your own, mostly reliant on agriculture, when there are issues such as floods or even droughts, have you started looking into these issues in relationship to the climate change? Are you going to work on an approach by adapting to climate change?
Thank you for the question. So our agency, what we're responsible for is the management of water. We have a Ministry of Environment as well. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, water is important not only for agriculture, it's for humans, for industry, for recreation. And what I would say is how we're adapting to the changing weather patterns is how we operate the structures that we have. And, a good example is last year we saw probably some of the lowest flows on record on the South Saskatchewan River. And so what we did is we changed the outflows of Lake Diefenbaker, making sure that we didn't impact downstream users, downstream communities, and we released less water than we normally would to capture as much water as we could and bring up the level of that reservoir so that we would make sure we had enough water for all the users. So I think from a changing, weather pattern, how we're operating those structures, have an impact, as well as, Mr. Donnelly talked about working with all the partners. I mean, we work with users as well. We saw some different structures in southwest Saskatchewan that didn't fill up because of lack of precipitation.
je vous arrête, Monsieur Chante, simplement.
I'll just cut you off. We know that Saskatchewan is a province that relies on oil and gas. Climate change is partly caused by oil drilling and the use of oil and gas. So you have both industries. You have agriculture and you have oil and gas. In your opening remarks, you said that Saskatchewan is the main exporter of agricultural products across Canada. So agriculture is at risk because of climate change.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think, we recognize that there are, changing weather patterns. And, that's why, when you have a project or irrigation or some of these structures, like I said, we have 74 dams across our province, and making sure that we manage that, making sure that we have ample supplies of water for times when there isn't enough moisture out there. So I think that's how we're adapting for agriculture. I don't know if you have anything to add, David.
Maybe one small addition. When Gardner Dam and Lake Diefenbaker were contemplated, it was really following after the Great Depression and the dry period that it occurred, and so it was really viewed as a drought-proofing project within Palliser's Triangle. And so, I think that's a part of the reason why we continue to advocate for additional irrigation development, because the water is there, the inflows are sustainable, and it really can help to offset some of the concerns that you've raised in terms of challenges with a changing climate.
Oui, je vous remercie, sauf qu'à un moment donné.
Thank you. At some point, though, there will be a drought, and that will affect water, whether it's on the surface or underground, and we will simply have a shortage of water. Mr. Donnelly, you partially responded my colleague's question. I have a question on the Canadian Water Agency. We know that various departments work on water. There are provinces, territories, and municipalities as you. Is the creation of a Canada Water Agency a structure that is superfluous, or is it a good agency that will create more communication? What do you expect out of the Canadian Water Agency?
For the question, and I think that it is a needed function. I think you can start with the commonality of monitoring and collecting information across the country, and that's a way to bring everyone together to find out what is the base problems. And then moving forward, I think the agency can play a role, but unless it is a coordinating function that can bring all of the provinces and territories to the table in a collective and collaborative way to address these challenges, which it won't be able to do on its own. It will need all of government to do that, and it will be too much. Even though I know I'm asking for the agency to broaden its mandate.
Merci. On doit s'arrêter là, puis se tourner.
We must stop there. It is now on to Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here. It's especially wonderful to see Mr. Donnelly here. Thank you for your lifelong advocacy for water. You talked a little bit about how early investment in watershed protection ensures that we are protecting communities in the face of the climate crisis. And in the fall, my colleague, the MP for Skeena-Bulkley Valley, Taylor Bacharach, presented a motion calling on the House to establish a $1 billion watershed security fund. It's really great that passed through committee, and since then, all of my NDP colleagues have also written to the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, calling on him to implement this fund. Yet, the funding so far is nowhere to be seen. And we've heard from other witnesses that there has been a disparity between the funding for the eastern parts of Canada compared to BC. So what would a $1 billion watershed security fund mean for BC?
Thank you very much for the comment, the kind comments, Ms. Collins. And I do agree that, and could encourage all parties to support that motion. That would be a good, strong step in the right direction, moving forward with $1 billion investment. And I know that we could leverage that funding from the federal government. We would come to the table in British Columbia with funding, but we would also immediately go to the private sector to engage as well, to leverage. So we could turn that money into more investment and work with not only our ministries, but also with our industries as well in British Columbia. So I mentioned the $100 million that BC has put into the Watershed Security Fund. We've also, prior to that, put $57 million over two budgets to particular projects over two budget cycles where community, municipalities, nations were engaged in working at the local level with their watersheds. It was incredible. And this was post-COVID. So to see people working in areas where they lost employment to come back into jobs in rural and urban communities, it was really a really positive success story. That didn't stop there. We also put another $103 million over 2 years into agriculture. So we have worked, because last summer we experienced drought in many communities, and I wanted to add on that where we could see more drought in different communities unless we take these preventative measures. It's going to intensify the divisive reaction. We've had communities where they come together, have built relationships, and they were able to talk to each other to avoid conflict. In some communities where those relationships don't exist, there was conflict, and it pits user against user. And that is, I think, very problematic. So that, again, is perhaps beyond the Canada Water Agency, and that's where it's an all-of-government approach to work with provinces and territories, but that preventative measures with green infrastructure is absolutely critically important to protect wetlands, to protect riparian areas, to protect areas that will absorb that water in times of flood or drought.
Now, the BC government, the BC NDP, has been a leader when it comes to implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. The DRIPA, it seems like, the province really spearheaded this, and we've seen the federal government also pass legislation to uphold the rights, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. BC seems to have a secretariat that is ensuring that there is this whole of government approach, that all of the legislation and policies and movement forward is going to be in line with the UN Declaration. In what ways can we learn? It seems like that's not happening in the same way at the federal level. So how has your government been prioritizing reconciliation with Indigenous partners, and especially when it comes to watershed security? How are you partnering with First Nations in BC on this file?
Thank you for the question, and it is BC is unique in that we have 204 nations within our province. So all provinces and territories are different, and I would encourage the government to reflect the diversity of each province. But for British Columbia, it's absolutely critical, and we recognize that it's important to work with these nations. And so in 2019, we made it legislation. We made it law. The law of the land is now to engage with nations co-managed in many territories, in many parts of British Columbia, is the way forward. And we are finding that is providing certainty. It's providing certainty for government moving forward, and also for business and for industry. And it's going to take time to develop those relationships. Some have that better, others it will take time. But it has, I think, allowed us to do a lot more. We have a lot more work to do, but that's the unique, in courts, nations have been winning for decades. We are reflecting that through legislation, and not only that, we think it's the right thing to do for reconciliation, move forward for certainty.
Merci. On passe maintenant à Monsieur Leslie.
Thank you. On to Mr. Leslie, please, for the second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start with the Saskatchewan Water Security Agency. It's a bit of a big question, so feel free to come back in writing to the committee on this. Being a bit of a unique organization, you deal with probably almost all of the federal departments that touch on water, which I know there will be many. So I'm curious, from an organizational standpoint, if you had the power to reform or streamline how the federal government, through those numerous departments, deals with your agency, what specifically would you recommend?
Thank you for the question. Those are some of the things I think that we've thought about as well with the creation of the Canada Water Agency. If there was a way that you could have everything water centrally located within the federal system, make it easier for, not only provinces to navigate, but as well as, the citizens. Right now, we have to contact numerous different, departments to get information. I also think, making sure that we have, regulations that work for, jurisdictions, and making sure that we're not duplicating, maybe what provinces are already doing. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
The only part I would add is, previously there was federal departments that would be able to provide funding for water projects. The PFRA obviously comes to mind and had played a huge role in the development of Gardner Dam. And so if that was something that could be looked at through the Canada Water Agency in supporting those types of projects, that would be very much welcomed by Saskatchewan.
Thank you. That kind of leads into my next question, but I'll add another one if you wouldn't mind providing in writing. In addition to the agencies and how we could reform that, what specific regulations tend to be a hindrance or difficult to work with? If you could provide that in writing. But as you mentioned with the Canada Water Agency, one of the challenges we've seen is nobody seems to really know what it's going to be. It started as PFRA 2.0, which is going to be difficult to reestablish all of these local understandings of local landscapes that have been lost with the end of it. And you mentioned you had 1 or 2 meetings. Mr. Donnelly, you mentioned you've had a couple of meetings, stakeholders. There seems to be a couple of meetings here and there, but nobody really knows what the core purpose of the agency is going to be. So maybe to the best of your ability, could you explain from your perspective, and I'll go to you after, Mr. Donnelly, what do you think the new water agency is going to look like? And you mentioned the funding apparatus. What currently does that look like, and is this a better place to actually funnel money through towards large projects like Lake Diefenbaker?
I guess maybe to answer, we don't, we've, like you said, we've had some initial meetings, 2 or 3, but we don't really have a clear, understanding of exactly how it's going to be working. We've had some conversations. They talk about, a funding partner. They talk about research, but we haven't had a clear understanding of what the agency is going to do. But I guess to answer your question on the funding on projects, I do think that this maybe is an opportunity for the agency to provide funding to provinces for different types of water projects. That's one of the, the areas we think they can help.
Maybe I'll go to Mr. Donnelly before. You mentioned kind of the whole of government approach, the fact of bringing all stakeholders together being a vital way that the BC government does this. It seems like my concern is this is going to be an Ottawa knows best. They went off and they've come up with this idea, and then they're quietly, slowly going to roll out what this actually looks like, which I think will just lead to duplication. And it's not going to lead to really any stakeholders, provinces, anybody involved with the water management being happy. Is that a fair assessment and a concern of yourself, Mr. Donnelly?
Well, I'll take your first question first, which is what is it going to look like? And I can't answer that. I think that's up to you and up to the government of Canada. As far as what we hope, and I think I share some of your concerns, is that it will look as good as the consultation and inclusion of provinces and territories. So I think that's absolutely critical. I said in my opening remarks that the number one recommendation is an increased investment. That is what British Columbia, as I would say, as an early adopter of belief that water is critical to our people, wildlife, economy, culture, to everything that we do, that we are investing and we are looking for partners. But what it could do, and I do agree with Mr. Jacques about a concierge role that the Canada Water Agency could play to prevent that, so to ensure that there is efficiency, that there is a one-window approach, that provinces, territories, users all can go to one area to find out which is the best place to go.
Thank you very much.
Monitoring, science, et cetera. There's lots of roles.
We'll go now to Madame Chatel.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to our witnesses. First, Mr. Jacques, I'd like to ask you a few questions on the Water Security Agency. Earlier, you mentioned that there's prioritization done among users, and then I will return on what your colleagues also said. Many users in the agricultural sector and various industrial sectors or mining sectors we know that there are droughts to come and precipitations that will be disrupted by climate change. There's an increasing amount of conflict between users. How do you think that a Canadian water agency can help in that discussion? It was mentioned that those parties might be able to speak and to have a mediation process. Is that the kind of role that your agency takes on?
Yes, thank you for the question. That is exactly what the Water Security Agency is. It brings almost everything, all the water-related activities in the province under one umbrella. And so we're responsible for the regulation, we're responsible for the licensing, and the monitoring, the testing, all of those aspects. So with your question about priority, I think that is a role that we're doing already. We work with all of the users, and we've had situations where we've had to cut back agriculture producers on the amount of water they use because of lack of precipitation, to make sure communities have first access and they get their full allocation. It's also how we operate the structures, how we manage the systems to make sure that we have the water, capture it when there's abundance water, to use it when it's drier. So that is a role that our agency already plays, that kind of mediation, if you will.
Et donc, selon vous, est-ce que l'Agence canadienne
Do you think that the Canadian Water Agency should do that when there are interprovincial discussions to be had?
So right now, our agency is also responsible. We sit on the different jurisdictional water boards, the Prairie Provinces Water Board. We have membership on the international boards and commissions as well. So I think, again, our agency is representing, our province and making sure we're monitoring the waters that flows into Saskatchewan, making sure we flow out our 50% share to Manitoba and to the United States or into Alberta in the northern watershed. So that's, again, a function that our agency is doing.
Okay, et juste pour clarifier, et
I'd just like to clarify something. And I'd also like to have Mr. Donnelly and Mr. Mack comment.
I'll throw in, thank you for the question, and I will throw in, first of all, I think the something that we've done in terms of our work in British Columbia is recognize that the water sector is roughly around 40 to 60,000 jobs, which is on par with the oil and gas in British Columbia. So it is a significant sector already. And luckily, we've done some economic reports to reflect that. In terms of interministerial, we definitely need to have clarity of jurisdiction, federal and provincial territorial. We've treated it a little bit different in British Columbia, where we have an integrated ministry. So as ADM Mack mentioned, it's water, land, and resource stewardship. It's a new ministry, but it's a very similar function where we're looking at a planning, coordination, regulatory role that ministry takes on and works with other ministries within our province. James? We're good?
et c'est important parce que certains témoins ont
That's important to note. Some witnesses did say that the Canadian Water Agency should take on more of a leadership role with regards to coordinating water, but we don't want to double up on efforts. If the provinces already are doing the work, the Canadian Water Agency should maybe do something else instead. So briefly, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Would you be duplicating your work? Or is there a role, rather, for the water agency?
À qui la question?
Could I jump in very
Is this going to duplicate the work? Is the agency going to duplicate what the provinces do?
I don't think so, but I think back to Mr. Leslie's point that if there isn't collaboration and work with the provinces and territories to find out what work is existing, it could cause problems. We absolutely need coordinated effort.
Madame Posé, vous avez le temps deux courtes questions.
Ms. Posé, 2.5 minutes, 2 short questions. Quickly then. Mr. Donnelly, a federal, provincial, and territorial committee took place a long time ago on drinking water. There were some recommendations that were made. That was over 20 years ago. Do you know if those recommendations that were actually enshrined into law in British Columbia, for example?
In British Columbia, I think I'll turn to James. If 20 years ago, that was a little before my time.
Yeah, I would have to follow up on that. I think we have new reports that come from our provincial public health officer. We do work with Canada around drinking water issues, but I'll just be honest, we're sort of working off more recent recommendations. I'd have to check to see if those still have life after this time.
And certainly for boil water advisories with nations, that has come way down in British Columbia. So we've addressed that as a high priority. And now our municipalities are looking at moving to tertiary in many cases, but certainly off primary to secondary. So there has been a huge investment in water infrastructure from the 90s to now, so over 30 years.
Et est-ce que c'est la même chose chez vous, Monsieur Sean?
Mr. Sean, is that the same? Is it the same in your province?
I think I would have to follow up as well, because that's 20 years ago I wasn't there, so I'd have to follow up.
Donc, on ne sait pas si...
So we don't know if there were any obstacles in implementing the regulation. Do I have 30 seconds, Mr. Chair? More or less. Many witnesses appeared here who came to meet us, researchers, citizens, and so on. Has anybody, they've talked to us about watersheds and invasive species. Is citizen participation something that is important in your provinces? Because it really is in Quebec.
You have high levels of public consultation, citizen consultation.
100%. I think that communities need to be engaged, like municipalities, working with nations, working with industry. If you don't have a voice at the table for critical decision-making, you're going to hear about it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on a little bit of what we were talking about with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, can you tell us a little bit more about the First Nations water table and what the BC government is doing and what we could learn at the federal level from this model?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. I think that's critical to our where we've got to. We started over 2 years ago with and then consultation and a commitment to work with nations. We've produced a What We've Heard document, we've produced an intentions paper, and these reflect the consultations that we've had, over 2,000 consultations with nations, and many, many others as well, including a roundtable with the Premier just September, and then a follow-up roundtable just recently. And it is for us in British Columbia critical that we engage with nations. We've, as a reflection, created a BC First Nation water table to look at co-developing the strategy, which is what we're at right now, looking at putting that strategy out. So, and we're hearing from all sectors, and that is going to be our challenge, is to engage all sectors in that strategy so they see themselves in that strategy. But again, the water table has been critical at providing a leadership role there.
You also have a BC Freshwater Initiative, which has a goal of having all freshwater ecosystems in BC to be in good health by 2030. Can you talk a little bit about the progress on that?
I think I'm going to hand that one to James on the progress.
Well, I think first off on freshwater, as the Parliament Secretary announced, one is these are so our approach has been to work with First Nations and make them community-led. So we have been driving that work through a series of investments. The first one was called Healthy Watersheds Initiative, which was actually a job creation program that we had done during a Strong BC pandemic response. It actually had a benefit of being a high job creator. A lot of the people participated chose careers in restoration and had a benefit of actually healthier watersheds in BC.
Unfortunately, we have to stop there, but if you have any
now.
comments you want to give to the committee in writing to complete the response, that would be appreciated. Mr. Mazier, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the witnesses for coming out this afternoon. My questions are for the Water Security Agency. You mentioned that maintaining provincial authority over water management is a key priority for Saskatchewan. Can you expand on this and why it's important to your province?
Thank you for the question. I think it's very much along the lines that what I mentioned earlier. I mean, we have those relationships with the communities and the industry, the stakeholders in our province. As I said earlier, we're the agency that regulates all aspects of water, the drinking water, wastewater, the licensing. So I think it's important, or I believe it's important, that our agency or our province maintain jurisdiction over that right. I don't see a need to duplicate those services that we're already providing.
It was nice into my next questions about duplication. And of course, I think that I've been hearing that lots from many witnesses here about the duplication potential it has. And we've seen lots of duplication in other water acts and what other water legislation. I'm from Manitoba, live at the bottom of the watershed. Thank you very much, Saskatchewan, for your water. And I've often, we've been quite frustrated many times in Manitoba. 2011 was kind of an eye-opening experience for us. It was interesting in listening to the governments at that time. They were saying, oh, we should have done something after the 2008 flood. And meanwhile, 3 years later, in that year, they actually Minot flooded out, and it was terrible down there. But it came down to, it was the mismanagement of the government legislation. And out of all this talk, out of all this studies and all this stuff, is there any advice you can give us as far as this committee when we're writing up these reports? What needs to be done to make sure that these good thoughts, these good intentions are actually followed? We can talk about consultations and all the good intent that we need to have communities there, but far too often they're not listened to and they're not acted on. If simply we just follow the regulations, things would be a lot better. So I don't know if you have any advice on that.
I can maybe start. Thank you. It's a great question, and the one thing that I've noticed with water management is that it can at times be reactive to the scenario of the day. And so, when you're in a period of drought, the focus can be looking towards increasing storage and that sort of thing, and not that it shouldn't, it should. But in terms of handling those events that occurred in 2011 and others, I agree. I think we do need to work with our communities, our neighbors, our neighboring provinces in terms of creating that proactive opportunities to mitigate those things. And I know talking to our folks that worked through those floods left a mark. It really did. And so I think those concerns remain. I don't know if I have a great answer to the question other than to say I think it's certainly noted. And those are things that through our infrastructure group, we are looking at opportunities to better manage our water all the time. And as Shauna mentioned, we do look at operating our structures in the way that provides best benefit. And in certain years, it is flood mitigation. Right now, we're more focused on storage. But I know, Shauna, if you know add on this, but we did most, Lake Diefenbaker and Gardner Dam that's the largest water management structure that we have. And we did recently review our operating plan, looking at, are we doing this to the best of our ability? So we are doing things, but I think the point is well taken. There's certainly more to do in that category.
And I think maybe I would just add, I think it's that constant communication, making sure we're working with our neighbors. I know we have a good working relationship with our two neighboring provinces. We have a memorandum of understanding with Manitoba on water management issues. We work closely with the government of Alberta on issues as well. And then as well, the international river systems as well, watersheds. So I think that's also important to make sure that we have that information sharing and that we're working together as jurisdictions.
I guess as the water agency, and how much have you had? From my understanding, you really still don't have a real clear sense of direction of where it's headed. Correct? So, and I know we've talked about, Mr. Donnelly talked about the funding, and as well as you guys as well. It always seems like we have these partnerships, right? So if the province brings some and then the feds bring some, there we have a project. And we might have some private stuff too going on, but there is where lies the problem. And I think it's too much like the old system. And I would implore all of you, if you have any words of advice or for this committee and for this study, if we're going to develop a water agency and going to spend a bunch of numbers on just coordinating a bunch of people, if there's some legislation that needs to be looked at, especially when it becomes down to interjurisdictional and national boundaries, please table them to our committee and so we can get it in the report.
Please do that. And I think what you're talking about is the revision of the Canada Water Act, maybe. We'll see. Mr. Longfield, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And I really enjoy your musings. Sometimes those little points are key to our study. So thanks for putting your 2 cents into the discussion as well, Chair. Mr. Donnelly, really good to see you back in Ottawa, and congratulations on the great work you're doing in BC. You mentioned in your testimony something about air. It's something that we haven't really considered in this study is the air impacts on water. Also, I'm thinking of Go Home Bay and Georgian Bay is up to 70 degrees Fahrenheit already this year. And so we have temperature effects on water that affects biodiversity. You mentioned how salmon like cold water. Trying to find cold water right now is a challenge. Could you maybe talk about the importance of clean technology and clean technology investment in things other than water that impact the water?
It's great to be back here, and it feels, I have to say, a little bit funny after 5 years to come back and see so many familiar faces, which is really nice. But yeah, absolutely, clean tech innovation. There's many sectors that are rising to the challenge to look at how they can reduce their impact and provide less of a footprint on watersheds and the water supply. And I think many industries are responding to that. That's what is needed. That's what it's going to take to, because we have a challenge. We're getting less water off glaciers. Glaciers are receding. We're having a problem with water storage. And in British Columbia, we've had issues with forestry management. And so retaining that water on the landscape is even more challenging. Municipalities are letting us know that. It's becoming a public safety issue. So these are compounding pressures. And so luckily we've had good response, not just from clean tech, but from many industries in BC that are saying we recognize the importance of water and we want to be part of the solution. So they are coming to the table with how they can make a difference, and at times it's going to require effort or investment from the government as well. So we are collaborating. We're working together. So I mean, the clearest one for me is in the agriculture community. They're looking at storage issues and looking at innovation and technology. So clean tech will drive agriculture tech.
Right, and I think we see that in Guelph as well with precision agriculture and what's been going on there. In terms of pollution, heat is also pollution. It's also waste for industry. And so both sides of that equation need to focus on reducing heat loss, reducing heat waste. The Net Zero Accelerator Fund we have in place to try and drive some of this innovation. $8 billion going into that fund, which is critical for Canada to meet its climate change goals, but also has an impact on water. Is there anything else around that we might include in our study in terms of air impact on water or heat impact on water?
Question. I'm going to ask James if he has others to add, but I would add that those considering looking at waste as an opportunity is absolutely critical, or looking at what we have been calling waste. So you mentioned that is a new opportunity for municipalities, regional districts. I know that's happening in British Columbia. Our government's doing that through our Clean BC strategy. These are opportunities to turn and help the economy turn around. So I think we're doing a good job, but we could obviously do better and looking at partners. So
okay,
he's giving me the
Thank
nod
you.
that I'm okay.
Thanks. And over to Mr. Jacques. I'm running out of time, but on agriculture, looking at beneficial management practices, something the agriculture and the farm community has really picked up on. Beneficial management practice, looking at things that will help with water, with climate change and biodiversity. Could you maybe comment on the importance of clean technology in those fields?
Yeah, I think I go back to my opening comments where I've commented that, with irrigation, we're seeing, fewer emissions to produce, we're producing more food on the same land mass, so there are going to be lower emissions. What I would also comment on is, we're seeing producers adopt technology, not only in, dry land farming, but we're already seeing it on irrigation, where they're using, it just escapes my mind right now, but, making sure that they're only putting, the right amount of water when needed.
4 hours.
Subsurface drip. So they're not overutilizing, water. So we're seeing producers investing in those technologies.
We're going to have to stop there. And
thank you so much.
I really want to thank the witnesses for being here in person and to offer their insights. We're going to have a very short break. We don't have any onboarding to do online, but we need to change over the panel. So I'll just break for a couple of minutes. Thanks again. Nice to see you, Mr. Donnelly, and nice to see you again, Mr. Jacques, and Mr. Cooper, and Mr. Mack. So thanks again. And we'll just break for a second.
We don't want to lose any time. We do have a long 3-hour meeting, all in all. Second panel, we have representatives from the government of Prince Edward Island. We have Sean Ledgerwood. He is the acting manager, water and air monitoring from the Department of Environment, Energy and Climate Action. We also have with us Mr. Haseen Khan from the government of the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. He is the Director, Water Resources Management Division, Department of Environment and Climate Change. Without further ado, gentlemen, we will ask you to share your 5-minute remarks, and we will begin with Mr. Ledgerwood.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to discuss freshwater resources and how our small island province is reliant upon the resource. As a province, we're 100% reliant on groundwater to supply our drinking water. All of our water is extracted from water wells. We also extract water from rivers for agricultural irrigation, but even in this case, there's an important link to groundwater. In the summer, the base flow from rivers can be almost entirely fed from groundwater. With ever-increasing demands and threats to our water, we're striving to understand and address the issues. We're discovering that droughts can affect water availability at times of high demand. We are seeing more anoxic events in our waters. They're occurring earlier and they're lasting longer. We're also noticing the incidence of saltwater intrusion in our wells are becoming more common. Because of this, we've been very active in trying to protect our valuable resource. In 2021, the PEI Water Act was proclaimed, which provides the foundation for water and wastewater management in PEI, providing government with the tools necessary to mitigate issues and employ protection of the resource. While the development of regulations is far from complete, several regulations, such as the water withdrawal regulations and the drinking water supply and wastewater systems regulations, provide mechanisms for government to properly manage water. Agriculture is a critical industry for the province, and there are increasing demands for water for irrigation. Water is extracted from both wells and from rivers for irrigation. However, we've been trying to move away from river withdrawals, as groundwater extraction through a well can have a less immediate impact on the river in a watershed than an instantaneous impact that comes from surface water extraction. We have also instituted a requirement for all major water users to create drought contingency plans. where the users provide written plans for what they will do to reduce water usage during drought conditions. Water permitting on PEI is done on a watershed by watershed basis. Water extraction is to only occur up until the threshold deemed harmful to freshwater aquatic life is reached. While most watersheds in PEI are not near water extraction limits, there are some watersheds where demand is approaching allocation limits. Our department has always been a proponent of transparent monitoring, as we use much of this data to determine how best to protect our water resource. As a requirement of the new Water Act, we have created the PEI Water Registry, and I encourage each one of you to look at that and discover all it has to offer. For our drinking water users, we've instituted several protection measures. For example, we offer drinking water analysis to the public for free. We're in the planning stage for the development of well field protection regulations for our municipal systems. We've long believed that protection and decision-making at a local level is an integral part of environmental protection. For example, PEI watershed groups on the island. With the Water Act, we hope that we can expand governance at a local level to include water allocation decisions. We consider the continued collaboration between the provincial and federal government as a key part in protecting our water resource. A very successful example of this is the Canada PEI Memorandum of Agreement on Water. Within this agreement, we've been able to partner and share resources with the federal government on a range of initiatives such as water quality and quantity monitoring, cabin monitoring, pesticide monitoring, SESI, shellfish water classification program, and for the past 2 years, an expanded pesticide monitoring program with PMRA. It is crucial that collaboration such as this and continued funding for water and wastewater systems continue, especially with the population growth we're seeing. These models have served both governments very well in the past. As I mentioned, agriculture is a critical industry for PEI. The federal government can support producers in their continued goal of reducing impacts to the environment. This can come in the form of research, education, collaboration with local watershed groups, and monitoring in the following areas: reductions to the use and impact of fertilizers, reduction of soil loss and improved soil health, the use of pesticides best suited for PEI's unique environment, and pest and drought-resistant crops. There is widespread use of pesticide products within PEI, and PMRA should be reviewing registrations with a PEI lens, ensuring they are safe to use with our unique environmental conditions. They have run an expanded pilot program across Canada the last 2 years, and we support the expansion of this program to fully understand the fate of these chemicals. As such emerging contaminants such as PFAS become an issue, there's often little known about them. Federal government can again assist with sampling costs, research, and setting guideline values. Governance at a local level is important, and the federal government should continue and expand support for local groups such as watershed groups on PEI. This support can include financial, research, and sharing scientific expertise. I hope I was able to provide you with a quick overview of the island's unique environment and the need for support in a variety of water-related issues. Thank you for your valuable time.
Monsieur Ledgerwood. Avant de passer à Monsieur Khan,
Thank you, Mr. Ledgerwood. Before moving on to Mr. Khan, I saw that the lights were flashing. Is there a vote? No, there's quorum. All right, then, Mr. Khan, the floor is yours.
I would like to begin by thanking the chair and honorable members for inviting the Department of Environment and Climate Change of the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador to appear before this committee and to share our experience on freshwater. Water is embedded inside everything we consume or manufacture and is the essence of life itself. Water has a spiritual significance for indigenous people and is a vehicle for the economic development of our communities. Water is a shared natural resource that crosses jurisdictional, geographical, and political boundaries. The key pillars for the effective management of water resources are water monitoring and reporting, prediction and forecasting, regulatory oversight, digital innovation, research and development, and coordination and collaboration among all stakeholders. Water management within Canada and its respective jurisdictions is facing many complex and challenging issues, which requires a robust and collaborative strategy. One of the main drivers for this is the impact of climate change on water resources, amplifying the ever-changing natural dynamics of water. The cornerstone of Newfoundland Labrador's water management philosophy is that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. The most visible impact of climate change in Canada are on water. More frequent and severe floods, droughts, storms, sea level rise, reduced sea ice coverage and duration that is having serious impact on our northern communities and their lifestyle, and less snowpack. Canada's water infrastructure, including water and wastewater treatment plants, dams, dikes, and levees, is aging. Appropriate measures are needed to upgrade or replace aging infrastructure to ensure public and environmental safety associated with climate change-related events. Significant progress has been made since 2001 in the area of clean, safe, and secure drinking water. However, small rural communities, especially northern communities, are still struggling to provide this necessity of life. The provision of clean and safe drinking water requires not only technical and financial capacity, but human operational capacity and teamwork among all stakeholders. Integration of traditional knowledge with science and respect for water into water management policies is essential for all levels of government. A comprehensive approach to federal water stewardship is required with less fragmentation of responsibility for water nationally. A modernized Canada Water Act should capture key themes of ecosystem-based management, stakeholder engagement, adaptive governance, digital innovation, research and development, and science and traditional knowledge-based decision-making, risk management, cross-sectoral collaboration, and policy coherence. There are huge gaps in coverage in existing monitoring networks, especially in northern parts of the country, where climate change impact is more pronounced, and in many cases, the current climate has already departed from historic norms.
Okay, we're going to have to stop there, Mr. Khan, but I'm sure there will be many questions, so you'll be able to share your remaining ideas in response to questions. We'll go to Mr. Mazier for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the witnesses of coming out today. I'm going to focus on Mr. Ledgerwood first of all and talk about the alternate land use program. We spoke briefly just outside there before this committee meeting, and it was, you were right, the pilot Alice was actually, the idea was all thought of in Manitoba and tested in Manitoba, right in my riding actually, by Shoal Lake. So it was good, and then PEI fortunately picked it up and embraced that whole model. And the key idea around Alice, the alternate land use service, was something so unique and so foreign, but was to involve the landowners. And I guess I just want you to kind of expand on that. How did the legend or the path of how Alice was developed in PEI, and what are you finding good about it, and where can we improve on it? Because it's one program that I think we can really leverage in the future as a water committee, and I think they need to hear that.
Thanks, that's a great question. And I can talk sort of high level on that because I'm not involved in the program at the finer levels. But it's been an incredibly great program for PEI. You're right, it was a little bit novel, and it was a little bit of convincing to get the public to get into the idea of paying farmers or agricultural producers to do something, right? That some people might say that they should be doing already, but it's a hurdle that we got over, and it's been incredibly successful. It's ongoing now. It's improving our environment, and we hope programs such as that continue, and especially new ideas like that. That's always very important. I don't know if I answered your question, but it's just to note that it's been very successful in PEI, and we continue to use that program.
I think the key message is that you do acknowledge, as well as I understand as well, it's having the landowners at the table, making those decisions, deciding where the water should be stored. Like, they're the managers. They know the best of what's going on in the landscape. And it actually comes down to saving. It's the best thing to do for society and for the landscape, but it's also the most efficient thing to do when it comes to money and that type of approach.
Yes, agreed. And I mentioned in my notes that governance at a local level is very important to us in all aspects, especially water allocation I pointed on. And you may look at our province, which is obviously the smallest, and think, the province itself is local, but we want to go by watershed basis. And when you get down to that really fine local level, you can have really good decisions that are, even at a small province like ours, come up with points that maybe the government didn't think of. So governance, collaboration at this, very local level, watershed in our basis, is very important, and we hope to continue that in a whole bunch of different aspects.
Okay, thank you. And I will switch a bit gears here on to talk about the Canada Water Agency. Has PEI been consulted on the Canada Water Agency?
Only through committees, I believe. We've been consulted with the Canada Water Act, but I don't know very much about the agency yet. There's just been a few things within some committees I've been in. So I was very interested to hear just before my presentation the Water Agency talking a little bit about where they plan to go, and I'm very interested in that. At our level, we're an island, literally, so we don't have transboundary water issues. So, what I was hearing a little while ago, that may be a big portion of what they're talking about. We'd be more, how can we partner, for programs and that sort of thing. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, kind of. So they're not really consulting you. Would you be the person that you would contact in the province?
Yeah. Well, eventually it would get to me, yes.
Eventually, okay. Mr. Khan, have they talked to Newfoundland at all about the Canada Water?
Yes, they have talked. We had a number of conference calls, and we provided comments during those conference calls, as well as we provided written comments that what type of issues and challenges are there based on our experience, and how those issues or challenges should be addressed as a part of this new agency.
So how many times, this has been going on, I think, for a couple of years now, like the engagement process, and I guess I was getting at that on the previous panel as well. Like, we can talk, government's notorious for talking, but then when it comes down to rubber hitting the road, people are getting flooded out or droughted out, it doesn't work. We go have some more committee meetings or anything like that. And that is I think the caution that we're talking about when we develop another agency, another layer of bureaucracy. And did the federal government address that at all with the water agency when they were talking? They said, oh, this is going to be much better? Or was it all about just, here, you're going to have a central place to have your funds?
If I recall correctly, I think the focus or the thrust of those discussions was that being a water manager involved in day-to-day water management issues in your jurisdiction, what is your experience in your dealings with various federal agencies? And what is your opinion that how water should be governed on long-term basis in Canada, which will ensure socio-economic benefit of the public as well as the public safety?
Thank you. We'll have to stop there. Ms. Taylor-Roy?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. It's a very interesting conversation about how we manage water resources across the country. And you've mentioned that climate change has a huge impact on water and water management, but how we manage our water also has an impact on climate change. It kind of goes both ways. And I think one of the areas I want to explore is, given that climate change is not within one province, whether PEI or Newfoundland or any other province, we know it's national, global. How do you see this water agency working with the provinces to discuss some of these larger issues in terms of how we work on climate change and water management, from wetlands, to the individual watershed management areas? I mean, and how can we bring that together to try and ensure that the effects of water management also help us in our fight against climate change?
Thank you very much. Very interesting and relevant question. I think that there are a number of aspects. The first is that if the fragmented governance of water within federal government could be consolidated under one agency, which is this Canada Water Agency, I think that would be a very positive step. So then provinces, they have one-stop shop. They know where to go, and then they will bring all of their issues, concerns to that particular agency, rather than going to 4 or 5 departments. On other aspect, federal government administers number of cost shared and work shared agreements with provinces and territories, and they are within different departments. So if all that can be consolidated under one shop, I think it will lead to efficiency, it will avoid duplication, and I'm sure it will lead to better kind of long-term governance of water for the benefit of Canadians.
Thank you. And Mr. Ledgerwood, do you have anything to add?
That was a great response, Nasim. Yeah, I agree with that. And as I said, we're a smaller jurisdiction, so we talk very much within our departments very quickly. Like, we have a very good net zero program that's fighting climate change within our department, right? So I think Haseen is right. If we can understand where to go and how that's going to relate back, that makes it a lot easier for us. The federal government is very big compared to PEI, the government, so it's very hard to navigate that sometimes. So, to make that easier with provinces, I think is a good idea.
So you see the Canada Water Agency is increasing efficiency and avoiding duplication, in fact, for the provinces that are going to be using or working with it. And there was another thing you mentioned, Mr. Ledgerwood, earlier, which was you were talking about PFAS, for example, contamination, fertilizers, pesticides, the impact of these things on our water safety, or water quality. How do you think the Canada Water Agency can play a role to ensure that some of the smaller provinces have the same, perhaps, research and resources as others do?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Great comment and great question. Yes, that's very important to us. As I said before, we're 100% reliant on our groundwater, so it is in utmost importance for us to keep that clean and free from contamination. So when we get into issues, and you mentioned PFAS, emergence chemicals, that's where our knowledge can be greatly enhanced with an organization that has that backing behind them, the strong research that the federal government quite often does, the knowledge of health limits and all that sort of thing coming together. that expertise can be a great help for a province like ours where we may not have that direct knowledge of something new.
And earlier we had the Water Security Agency from Saskatchewan here and talking about a number of issues. One of the things that I'd read about in the Lake Diefenbaker Dam expansion or reservoir expansion was some Indigenous leaders who felt that the federal government should have a role in water management because, of course, Indigenous affairs are a federal responsibility, and they're so impacted, especially as we were talking about, Mr. Khan, in the northern part of Labrador, for example, and other areas. How do you think the Canada Water Agency will help in the reconciliation, cooperation between the Indigenous rights and what they're looking for with regard to water management and some of the provincial and territorial issues?
Thank you very much. I think we have to take a step backward. Historically, federal government has played a strong leadership role in facilitating the monitoring and reporting of water in the country, providing centralized repository for all water-related data which is being collected all across the country, using that data to develop policies and guidelines for the governance of water.
Thank you very much.
So I think these are the areas where Canada Water Agency can play a very important role.
Thank you very much.
Madame Posey.
Oui, merci.
On to Ms. Posey. Thank you, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. In your respective provinces, I understand that the Canadian Water Agency is something that might be useful as long as it doesn't duplicate the structure that already exists in your province. With regards to fresh water, are there other issues other than a lack of coordination and other issues that the federal government is not taking charge of or that they can be addressing in a better way?
Go ahead.
I think one of the areas where we have seen issues and gaps with the climate change is the gaps in our monitoring network. That is, water quantity monitoring networks, water quality monitoring networks, groundwater monitoring networks, climate monitoring networks, especially in northern areas where climate change impact is more pronounced. So that is where I think federal government can play a very important role to fill in those gaps under various ongoing cost-shared and work-shared programs. Another important role federal government can play is provide national guidance that how that data which we are collecting, that data can be converted into information, and information into knowledge products which would be of interest and benefit to common Canadians. I give you an example. In 2000, as a part of our work, that is federal government, all provincial and territorial jurisdictions under the umbrella of CCME, Canadian Council of Ministers of Environment, we developed a tool, which is a communication tool, Water Quality Index. That is how this water quality data can be communicated to the public. Public is not concerned with the data. They want to know, is my river good for swimming? Is my river good for fishing? Is this water good for drinking? And if we can provide that type of information to Canadians, I think we will be doing great justice to ourselves and to our mandate.
Et Monsieur.
Just to follow up on Hassan's comments, with PEI, I've mentioned a little bit about pesticides. There's a large use of pesticides in PEI, and one of the things that we'd like to see is when the pesticides are registered by PMRA to really look at the unique situation PEI has. When they register products, it's not always a one-size-fits-all, and PEI is very dependent on the groundwater different types of soils, very unique. So that's one thing I'd like to see moved a little bit more on a more specific basis on the type of environment we have. And I would agree with most of Hasseen's comments. Just to follow up, we've been trying with our water registry to do exactly what Hasseen was asking, to make data in a form that people can understand. Just raw lines and lines of data doesn't really mean anything to most people. But when you put it in an indicator or that sort of thing, it can be very useful to the public.
Donc, si je comprends bien ce que vous dites, c'est que la...
If I understand correctly, then, the quality and the quantity of the data that is collected by provinces and the government is not receiving the right amount of exchange, or it's not being exchanged properly. Is that correct?
I'm not, could you expand on that a touch? I'm not exactly sure what you mean.
Non, c'est que j'essayais de voir avec la...
Given the answer to my first question, I was trying to clarify. It seems as though there is some information federally that you are not receiving on time, or that you are not receiving at all, maybe. So the exchange of data doesn't seem adequate. I'll ask you another question. In your respective provinces, what are the infrastructural challenges that are the most preoccupying right now? And of course, infrastructure related to water.
I can go.
Okay.
Go ahead. Okay. Sorry. For us, it's aging infrastructure with wastewater and drinking water facilities. There's a lot of facilities out there that are aging, and we need more funding to get them up to date, and especially even including climate change. As you know, as you build new facilities, infrastructure, climate change has to be part of it, and a lot of ours is aging, like I said, so that would be an opportunity, a lot more funding there to get those into kind of up to, not standards, but up to newer facilities, I guess.
Your first question, the exchange of data. I think the data is there, and we have very good system where data is collected on real-time basis and shared on real-time basis. So that's a very positive step and improvement. But as I mentioned earlier, our challenge is there are gaps in certain part of the country, especially in northern areas, and those gaps need to be addressed. But wherever we have Moiety network, they are working excellent and providing the information.
We're going to go to Ms. Collins now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the witnesses for being here. Both the federal and provincial governments have a responsibility to ensure that First Nations communities, Inuit communities, Métis communities have access to clean drinking water. I would like to hear from both of you, maybe starting with Mr. Khan, what your government is doing, what the landscape is when it comes to access to clean drinking water, communities who might not have access to clean drinking water, and what the government's doing to ensure that those communities get access.
The provision of clean and safe drinking water, and our honorable member also asked this question earlier, that requires a multi-barrier approach. One size fits all does not work. So you have to have the concept of multi-barrier. And this was one of the outcomes of that national committee which was created 20 years ago. I was one of the co-chairs of that committee, that we promoted the implementation of multi-barrier concept all across the country for all public water supplies, and that has been embraced and implemented. So you have multiple barriers. If one barrier fails, there are other barriers to protect the safety of drinking water. What our province is doing, we have so far rolled out 2 clean, safe, and secure drinking water action plans. And those action plans have certain targets, certain indicators. and we produced annual report how we are kind of performing or how we are making progress.
Can you
And
share a little bit about the kind of trajectory, like what kind of progress you've made?
Yes, we have reduced number of boil water advisories from 350 to 170. That is substantial progress. We have increased the number of trained operators from 80 to 350. So these are some and we are proud of that. We have increased number of water treatment plants from 5 to 25. So we have made progress in each and every area. The most important thing we have done, we have put all drinking water quality data in public domain. Any member of the public, anywhere in the country, can go to our web page, select the particular community, and see what is the quality of drinking water in that particular community. Is that community on boil water advisory or not? So I think that during last 20, 25 years, we have made substantial progress, but still there is lots of work to be done, especially in small rural communities and northern communities. And we maintain very good working relationship with our indigenous communities. We offer all those programs to those communities which we offer to non-indigenous communities.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. The landscape in PEI is not very large indigenous communities, so very small, and it's a federal jurisdiction, as you know. But because we're small, we also collaborate with those communities whenever they want. So if they need expertise from our department, we just, talk, collaborate as need be. So what we do to protect them individually, I don't know if it's focused on any one group, but as a whole for the province, the Water Act, as I said, is just relatively new. That's going to give us more powers to ensure that our drinking water is clean for every resident.
And can I ask, just because I don't know much about the landscape in PEI, are there boil water advisories? Do the Mi'kmaq people in PEI have access to clean drinking water across Prince Edward Island?
I would say the whole province has good drinking water and good access to it. Are there boil water advisories? Some, but not that many. We don't rely on surface water, so it's all groundwater fed. So most of the time, there would have to be a problem with the system to have a boil water advisory.
And I guess maybe that leads into my next question, just about emergency management, disaster response. Both of you spoke a little bit about the impacts of climate change and the threats that communities face. Can you tell us what you want to see from the federal government when it comes to emergency response, threats to our watersheds that come from climate change, and how the federal government could better support provinces and municipalities when it comes to these issues?
Okay, I'll go first, Hazine. I think in our position, like as I already mentioned, the infrastructure that we have for wastewater and drinking water systems, more funding to upgrade those, to get them newer, that would be the main thing, I think. And I forget the first part of your question, I'm sorry.
Really just what you want from the federal government when it comes to ensuring that our communities are climate resilient, and that what response you want from the federal government when there are these kind of climate-related natural disasters, whether that's hurricanes, wildfires, drought, flooding.
Yes, well, we certainly know hurricanes after Fiona, and that was a big wake-up call for the province. I think it still comes back to infrastructure for us, and we've got a climate change section that is really aggressive on the adaptation side, and we've been working very hard to make sure that we adapt to climate change, and part of that is the infrastructure, part of that is emergency programs and that sort of thing. So additional funding, additional research and expertise.
C'est bien noté, en fait, vos besoins en
I've taken note of your infrastructural needs. I'm going to move on to the next turn, but I will reduce the time to 4 and 2 minute rounds, because then we have another hour of work after this panel. So 4 minutes, Mr. Leslie.
I'd like to start with you, Mr. Ledgerwood, regarding some of the comments you made earlier. You You mentioned that the groundwater is the source of water and you have good drinking water in the province, but you seem to allude to a concern over some sort of contamination of crop protection products used by farmers. And you suggested that the PMRA should perhaps consider delineating between the rest of the country and PEI users of products that are marked and used properly on label. I'm just wanted you to clarify, do you think that PEI farmers, whether they be grain farmers, who I think are in town today, actually advocating for availability of tools, or potato farmers should have reduced access to crop protection products that PMRA approves?
Definitely not. All I'm saying is we want to make sure that the products they do use, agriculture industry is critical to our province, just like I said before. And I just want to make sure that the products they are using are unique and properly registered for our province. That's all. I'm not saying we should cut anything back. It's more about having the right products for the right circumstances.
And I trust that farmers are choosing that correctly. Going back to the Canada Water Agency, thus far it seems like the Canada Water Agency might be everything to everybody all at the same time, and I'm very skeptical that that is going to be the case. Mr. Khan, you mentioned water quantity as one of the things. That seems novel to me. We've seen a lot about quality, monitoring and data collection, standardization, which all sounds lovely, but very little on water quantity and flows, which is certainly within provincial jurisdiction for the most part. And I'm just kind of curious, from your several conference calls and your lack of calls, what do you actually think the Canada Water Agency, if put out today, what is it going to be?
I think that Canada Water Agency can play a very important role in rolling out national policy guidance in various areas. That could be water quantity monitoring, water quality monitoring, or flood risk mapping, or other areas. So they can carry multiple hats. They can be one-stop shop for provinces. They can provide national policy guidance on various issues. They can coordinate these various federal, provincial, cost-shared and work-shared programs. So I think they can play a role of a centralized agency, a consolidated water agency for various water-related functions within the federal government.
Okay, I hope that that ends up being something like what it might end up being. I'll move back to Mr. Ledgerwood. Smaller municipalities often don't have the capacity or the funding to pay for a lot of the environmental studies that lead up to whether it be core infrastructure projects or water management projects. I assume, smaller municipalities, you mentioned at the local governance level within PEI. In my riding, we have a municipality that had paid thousands of dollars for a study to look at a climate adaptation project that would mitigate overland flooding, which is a high likelihood, and it was denied without really any understanding. And now they have some cold feet about further applications because these small municipalities have to pay thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to get the initial application in for a project approval. I'm just kind of curious whether or not you believe overall there's adequate support and how, as a smaller province with smaller municipalities, you can try to help guide them through this difficult process.
We've got about 15 seconds, but then you can always answer the question at another opportunity.
Yes, it is a challenge. We've been trying to work with some of that. You talked about inland flooding. We just created a map for all of PEI for inland flooding. So some of that work hopefully can help municipalities in their work. But yes, it is a challenge, and additional funding to help municipalities in that sort of.
Thank you. Madam Chatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Canada Water Agency is really looking at three main objectives, and it touched across several points that you raised, but I wanted to you for that opportunity to tell the committee what they should be prioritizing that would be most helpful for provinces in managing the water. The one, and we talk, Mr. Khan, you referred to it, they look at more of a one-stop shop because there are several departments dealing with water. They want to regroup and have a whole of government approach. They wanted to make it easier for a decision maker and Canadian to find federal resources on fresh water. The second category is more collaboration with provinces, territories, with the U.S. as well, and with Indigenous. And the third one is really about science and data. They wanted to leverage freshwater science and data, improve the program, report regularly all across Canada with the quality, quantity, availability, and use of water in Canada. And they wanted to develop the national freshwater data strategy that would enhance the use of data and the quality of data. So, and they want to do that with all key partners. So, in your mind, where would be the best use of the resource of the Canada Water Agency in those broad categories?
I think that Canada Water Agency should focus in those areas where provinces are not working, because provinces, they have very strong expertise in water management. They are dealing with floods, they are dealing with dam safety, they are dealing with clean and safe water. So Federal Canada Water Agency can play a kind of an overarching agency to act as a technical resource for provinces on research and development, on innovation, on development of tools which we can use to transform, to convert that data which we are collecting into information and knowledge which is of interest to Canadians, which Canadians needs on day-to-day basis. So they can be a driving force or central clearinghouse for all that type of work.
Thank you.
Yes, and I would agree with Hassine. It's the scientific knowledge that could be of very big benefit to smaller jurisdictions. That would be one thing. The collaboration with policies at a national level, you know, bigger than the province level, it'd be good for that. I think those are the two main parts that I would see.
And is there a role to collect the best the best practices out there, not just in Canada, but because we are international partners, we are participating in OECD forum, UN forum, World Bank forum. So and everybody is talking about climate change and the importance of water. So finding, identifying, applying, suggesting best practices in various fields like agriculture is one of them. Would you think that would be a role to play?
It could be, as long as it's going to be different in different regions of the country, right? So as long as it's specific to the province that they're talking about at the time. Agriculture in the prairies is not the same as agriculture in PEI. So it has to be based on the specific.
Merci, Madame Posé, 2 minutes.
Thank you. On to Ms. Posé for 2 minutes. Thank you. You're likely familiar with the Committee on Freshwater that gave recommendations in 2024. Are these recommendations that you will welcome, that you will accept? Will you think of any kinds of rules and regulations that will allow you to reach the goals stated in the recommendations?
Okay. Any recommendations we take seriously and we would look at and see if it fits our unique situation. So I don't know if there's a broad answer for that, but any recommendations we would look at and see if we can incorporate them or not. Does that answer your question?
Mais c'est que j'aimerais ça savoir, qu'est-ce que vous...
What I'd like to know is what your priority is. Earlier, I asked you about infrastructure. Now everything is connected. Will improving rules, is that a priority for you? Is protecting biodiversity a priority for you? Because that's also related. Is that something that's a priority for you, the rules? Mr. Khan?
Yeah, I think our first priority, speaking from Newfoundland Labrador perspective, is to address the gaps in data, to address gaps in monitoring networks, because that provides the basis for whatever work we do, whether we develop policies or we develop best management practices or standard operating protocols. So I think that is the first action, that we would like monitoring networks providing coverage to all part of the country. And once that has been done, then certainly we would like to see that how we can develop best management practices, tools such as flood risk maps to respond and to adapt to climate change. So I would say first priority is data, second priority is policies, and third priority is then to work as a team.
Thank you. Merci, Madame Posé. Ms. Idlout, welcome to the committee. And you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for sharing information with us. I'd like to ask for both witnesses to respond. How are the effects of climate change, such as flood risks, considered when dealing with wastewater? For example, during the 2013 Calgary floods, raw sewage ended up in the Bow River because the wastewater plant was flooded. Calgary has an incredible water treatment and wastewater plant, but disasters still happen. What are your provinces doing to prepare for such disasters?
Okay. What we are doing, that all infrastructures which are designed now and which come for regulatory approval, we make sure that climate change lens has been incorporated in the design of those infrastructure. That is the first thing we are doing, because as you mentioned, we have learned from our experience that the infrastructure which was designed and built 30, 40 years ago, they did not took climate change into consideration. And that's why in many of our communities, those infrastructures are failing. So it's a two kind of stage process. First, the infrastructure which is already there, we have to upgrade that slowly and gradually to meet climate change conditions. And any new infrastructure which we consider for approval should be in compliance with climate change conditions.
Much like Newfoundland, we're in kind of the same boat. Every decision we make, everything we build now has a climate change lens. We have climate change sort of mini experts in all of our departments across the government. So we're incorporating that now, just like Hassine said.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, that's good. Mr. Cram, you have 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for joining us today. I've often wondered for provinces like Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland, which are surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean and therefore have unlimited access to water, except it's salt water, have either of your provincial governments ever studied the possibility of desalination facilities to acquire drinking water and other uses of water from the ocean, so that changes in river flows in any one year don't make that much difference? Is that something that has ever been studied in any great depth?
The cost of converting that seawater into acceptable drinking water is very, very high. So our focus is to make use of our freshwater resources. But yes, we have been considering the impact of how especially as you said, that we have 70% of our population lives in coastal areas. With climate change, sea level is rising. And that rise in sea level, how it is impacting our groundwater wells, which are being used as source of drinking water in coastal communities, because that is raising the issue of saltwater intrusion. And we are trying to develop policies so that we can optimize the pumpage of water in order to minimize the pumpage of salt water into those wells. So this is an aspect which has been looked into, which has been both modeled as well as monitored, but we have not looked into using seawater as source of drinking water for cost-benefit reasons.
And Mr. Ledgerwood?
Yes, and we, not that I'm aware of for saltwater desalination, we focus more on, we've got a very plentiful aquifer. Our priority is to protect that aquifer. We've got quite a bit of water. It's not limitless, but at this point, good quantity that serves the needs of the islanders. So our focus is on protecting that and not so much about desalination at this point.
Okay. And so the committee has discussed at length a possible future mandate for the Canada Water Agency. And one of the proposals that has come up is a cost-sharing model for major infrastructure projects. We had witnesses before from Saskatchewan to talk about the Lake Diefenbaker project. And I'm wondering, are there similar major projects on the drawing board in your provinces that could benefit from this cost-sharing model?
I'll go first. I don't think there's any major, and I mean, you talk about large scale, that wouldn't be our scale at all. But it's more about, like I've harped on several times already, is our aging infrastructure that we'd like to upgrade, and that's where we see the most benefit right now.
Yeah, certainly projects falls in two categories. One is the infrastructure upgrades or rehabilitation, and I think for that, cost-share programs would be highly beneficial. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, that our infrastructure is aging, and we have to invest in that infrastructure. And the second is that technical guidance, that how we can operate and maintain those infrastructure, what tools we can develop, such as to develop flood risk maps, to develop flood forecasting models. The national guidance on how we can manage the areas which have been designated as floodplains, I think that is the most pressing issue.
Thank you. We'll go now to Mr. Mr. Ali for 4 minutes.
Chair, I want to share my time with my colleague Mike Morris. He might have some question to ask.
Okay.
Are you? Okay. All right. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Through you to Sean Ledgerwood, that acting manager of Water and Air Monitoring Department of Environment, Energy, and Climate Action. First of all, thank you so much for being here today and enlightening us with your knowledge. In your view, what role do you believe that Canada Water Agency can have in Prince Edward Island's context?
In the PEI context, I think I'll go back to providing research, providing expertise, really giving us knowledge where we don't have the expertise, providing some of that, providing policies that would benefit and be useful for PEI, that would be adaptable to PEI. So those two things, I don't think those are the two main priorities, I think, for us.
And what role do you believe that Canada Water Agency can have in ensuring that we're prepared for the impacts that climate change is having on our freshwater resources?
Yes, thank you. Another good question. As I said, our climate change department is very aggressive with adaptation, and I think having our department collaborate with experts in the field that the Water Agency may be able to provide and use that expertise to complement our program, complement our adaptation going forward.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Khan, again, thank you for being here. I'll ask you the same question. So what role do you believe that Canada Water Agency can have in Newfoundland and Labrador's context?
Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier, I think the best role Canada Water Agency can play for Newfoundland, Labrador, as well as for other jurisdictions is to act as one-stop shop for all water-related issues, to provide national guidance to deal with emerging water issues in terms of best management practices, standard operating protocols, which will apply to various regions of the country, as well as to kind of facilitate the management of various ongoing cost-shared and work-shared programs between federal government and jurisdictions, provincial and territorial government. And the most important thing is to kind of to see the digital innovation and research and development which will help jurisdictions to respond to climate change adaptation and climate change impacts.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Chair, I'd like to share my time with Mr. Lloyd, please. Rest of the time. Yeah, Longfield. Yeah, Longfield. Yeah, Mr.
How much
Longfield.
time do I have left?
Lloyd.
30 seconds, basically. 35.
Okay, just very quickly, I managed a business that supplied water filters to paper mills. And I was criticized at some points of the year because I had way too many filters. But when the floods hit in the spring, you needed all the help you could get. Could you comment on how important it is to maintain data so that we can adapt quickly when we need to Mr. Khan?
Data plays a very, very important role in responding to these natural disasters or emergencies. We in Newfoundland Labrador have experienced number of floods which were not there historically, and we attribute those to climate change. And our real-time data monitoring network, both for water quantity and water quality, has been a blessing and lifesaver, because we can alert people in advance that these are the areas which are potentially going to be flooded and these areas should be evacuated. And we work with our fire and emergency services. So we work as a team where our role is to analyze that technical data on real-time basis and then share that information with municipalities and first responders.
Thank you. Mr. Khan, I don't know if you've heard of Bill C-317. It dovetails with everything you're saying, and I hope it gets through the Senate. Okay, so thank you. That was a really interesting discussion. From a different perspective, not from the perspective of the provinces like Ontario and Quebec and BC, but from the perspective of provinces in the Atlantic that have different needs and different perspectives. So thank you. I think we benefited greatly from your testimony. We're going to take a short break because we go into a 106.4 meeting. Yeah, we're just going to take a break, colleagues. Thank you again for making the trip to Ottawa for this meeting. We'll get back to it, and of course, yeah. Yeah.
Can you confirm with the clerk that that the funding agreements requested by this committee for the Net Zero Accelerator Fund have not been received? To the clerk.
Madam Clerk, have you received the copies of the funding agreement, Net Zero Accelerator funding agreements? Okay, Mr. Van Koeverden, you want to intervene on?
Not before Dan was finished. Sorry, Mr. Major.
He's finished. I think that was his question.
No, that's the beginning. I just want to get that answer. So we have not received those documents, correct?
I haven't seen them, but
no, we have not seen.
I mean,
them.
Okay, that was
so
a
here we go.
rhetorical question. Okay,
wait, the records from Industry, Science, Economic Development with respect to the Net Zero Accelerator Fund were received about 2 weeks ago. That's not what we're talking about?
Is it the record? There was a letter or some kind of.
There was a motion put forward, but,
but
you
there was
made it quite clear that we have not requested the documents requested from the Net Zero Accelerator Fund. We have not agreed. We've not seen those agreements.
Right, but
so that's it. That you've answered the question, and the clerk has confirmed. So thank you very much.
Okay.
So here we go. I would like to move the following motion. Given that the government has failed to provide the committee with the following documents and information relating to the $8 billion Net Zero Accelerator Fund. They failed to provide all complete contributions signed to date for the Net Zero Accelerator. Failed to provide the government's complete tracker tool used to measure the Net Zero Accelerator's progress and results, and all internal Net Zero Accelerator targets set by the government, including the government's Net Zero Accelerator emission
Juste un
reduction
rappel au
target.
règlement, Monsieur le Président.
Oui, Madame Posey.
Call to order. The interpreters don't have the text of the motion, and I think that Mr. Messier is speaking too fast. Maybe he can slow down.
Deuxième partie de votre intervention, vous avez dit.
I missed the second part of your intervention. You said that the interpreters don't have the motion in writing. No, they don't have the motion in writing, and Mr. Major is going too fast.
Copy too.
Take a second here.
Sorry about that.
On est prêt? Nous sommes prêts, oui? OK, parfait. OK, allez-y, Monsieur Mazer.
Sorry about that. It's $8 billion. It's pretty exciting. So I'll start from the top again. Given that the government has failed to provide the committee with the following documents and information relating to their $8 billion Net Zero Accelerator Fund, all complete contributions agreements signed to date for the Net Zero Accelerator, the government's complete tracker tool used to measure the Net Zero Accelerator's progress and results, and all internal Net Zero Accelerator targets set by the government, including the government's Net Zero Accelerator emissions reduction target. The committee invites Simon Kennedy, Deputy Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, Jean-François Tremblay, Deputy Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, and Jerry DeMarco, Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, to appear before the committee on June 11th, 2024 at 17:30 Eastern for no less than 2 hours. The committee invite the members of the Greenhouse Gas Interdepartmental Working Group and members of the Strategic Innovation Fund's Investment Review Committee to be present for technical questions as needed. The committee ordered the production of all 1. Complete and unredacted signed contribution agreements, and 2. Fully unredacted term sheets to date for the Net Zero Accelerator, and the committee order the government's fully unredacted, unrestricted tracker tool used to measure the Net Zero Accelerator's progress and results. Mr. Chair, this may be the first time in decades that the Standing Committee on Environment was forced to call an emergency meeting, but it's for very good reasons. It's for $8 billion. That's how much the Liberals charge taxpayers for the Net Zero Accelerator Fund. 4 years ago, Justin Trudeau announced his Net Zero Accelerator Fund. He promised Canadians that his $8 billion program would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But the Environment Commissioner revealed the Liberals were giving away billions of dollars to Canada's largest emitters without any commitment to reduce emissions. The Environment Commissioner stated, and I quote, "The department did not always know to what extent greenhouse gas emissions had been reduced by those companies that took part in the Net Zero Accelerator Initiative, or whether the funding provided would lead to reduced emissions," end quote. If members of the committee don't take this matter seriously, you're failing to do your job. In fact, the Commissioner also revealed the government wasn't even tracking the value for money of their $8 billion net accelerator fund. The Commissioner stated, and I quote, "We've seen no public reporting on the value for money," end quote. The Liberals think it's okay to give away billions of taxpayer dollars to multinational companies. Canadian taxpayers deserve to know what they're paying for. That's why the committee ordered the production of all funding agreements and emissions reduction information on the government's Net Zero Accelerator Fund. But the Liberal government completely defied our committee once again and refused to release the information. It was another slap in the face to this committee and to Canadians. And in my opinion, it was a blatant breach of privilege. And now we are dealing with an $8 billion cover-up. In fact, the Liberals claim that the emission reduction target of the Net Zero Accelerator is protected under cabinet confidence. The government stated in their response to this committee, and I quote, "ISED is not in a position to disclose the targets as they are protected under cabinet confidence," end quote. Yeah, cabinet confidence. The government emissions reduction target for the Net Zero Accelerator Fund is so secret that they're not even willing to share it with this committee. This is unheard of, and it's absurd. But this isn't surprising, given that Canada's Environment Commissioner also reported the Liberals are not on track to meet their own 2030 emission reduction targets, or given the fact that Canada dropped 62nd to 67th on the Climate Change Performance Index, 4 rankings lower than the year before. How can Liberals ask Canadians to pay for an $8 billion program that was intended to reduce emissions without showing anyone the results? And now, suddenly, Minister Guilbeault is pretending that this $8 billion slush fund he isn't responsible for. He's pretending that the Net Zero Accelerator Fund has nothing to do with him, despite the fact that it's supposed to reduce emissions. But that's not true. In Minister Guilbeault's mandate letter, the Prime Minister states, and I quote, "To realize these objectives, I ask that you achieve results for Canadians by delivering the following commitments. Support the Minister of Innovation, Science and the Industry in the implementation of the Net Zero Accelerator Initiative, with an emphasis on ensuring that investments drive industrial transition and significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions on a scale consistent with achieving Canada's climate goals in a meaningful transform Canadian industry to lead and compete in a net zero emissions future." End quote. I can repeat that, I guess, if I have to. Even if the advisory body that provides advice on the Net Zero Accelerator applications is co-chaired by Minister Guilbeault's own department. Minister Guilbeault must be held accountable for this $8 billion cover-up. I will also draw your attention to the response the Liberal government provided by this committee. They stated, and I quote, "Greenhouse gas reductions set to occur after 10 years' time cannot be reliably estimated," end quote. The government also stated, and I quote, "The precise estimate of reductions is not achievable for most Pillar 2 and Pillar 3 projects," end quote. It appears the $8 billion Net Zero Accelerator is free cash for Canada's largest emitters. And meanwhile, the Liberals punish Canadians with a costly carbon tax. So we must end this cover-up. We We must release the contracts, release the emission reduction targets, release the results, and tell Canadians why they're paying for this Liberal government's $8 billion net zero accelerator slush fund. Anything less is a slap in the face to Canadians and this committee. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Before I start, I'd just like to state on the record that this is a blatant misuse of a 1064. 1064s are emergency meetings. We meet twice a week in this committee, so this kind of alarmist, phony rhetoric from the Conservatives is not new, but misusing a 1064 is silly and totally not necessary. But we know that the Conservatives are doing it for clicks and likes on Facebook and not to actually achieve any progress in this committee. Once again, I'll state that the Net Zero Accelerator Fund does have emissions reductions targets attached to every contract. That's actually in the press releases associated with the funding releases. For example, in Hamilton, we're investing with the steel industry to eliminate coal from the production of structural steel. It's fantastic. I went to McMaster. There used to be huge plumes of smoke. They continue to burn quite a lot of coal there, but using electric arc technology, they will be able to eliminate the need for coal. That same practical application of electrical technology will be in Algoma, at Algoma Steel. So these are the types of things we're talking about. We're also investing in carbon capture and storage technology with some of Canada's largest emitters. In order to reduce emissions, we need to work with Canada's largest emitters. That's called low-hanging fruit. It's the opportunity to address the emissions where they are. And in a place like Hamilton and the steel sector, we can see them with our bare eyes. It's not abstract. Those emissions are right in front of us. And in the case of that investment, it was associated with a large number of emissions reductions that were clearly stated. I forget the exact number of megatons, but it was on the order of 2,500 vehicles taken off the road in Hamilton, Ontario, which makes a big difference for air quality in Hamilton. But Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, that's not the point. We can talk about that program or literally any other program in normal committee business at any time, but the Conservatives want to be alarmist and pretend as though there's some sort of a cover-up or a scandal going on when we're just investing money with the Canadian industries while they say they want technology. Well, this is literally technology. We're investing in technology like electric arc for steel production and carbon capture or storage. So, for them, they're always speaking out of both sides of their mouth. The Conservatives like to take to social media and suggest that the government is hiding contracts, but contracts need to be confidential in many cases because we're dealing with companies that want to ensure that confidentiality is maintained. And releasing confidential business information sets a really bad precedent for the government. And saying that it doesn't, saying that it's hiding something when it clearly doesn't, and all of the information that they're suggesting would be in those contracts is literally in the press release. So this is just for clips. It's absurd. The point is our government is open by default, and during the briefing, I think it's fair to request that the department continue to work with companies in advance of the briefing to ensure that as much information, more information is available. But like literally all of the demands from Mr. Mazer are in the press release. So, and I'll also state again that there is a 25-page document that was delivered on the day that it was requested, indicating like all of the information about the Net Zero Accelerator Fund from the Department of Industry, Science, Economic Development, because as I've also stated before, this is not an environment climate change program. It works with industry leaders, the steel industry, and other sectors, ones that the Conservatives pretend they support, but when it comes to investing with them in collaboration to lower their emissions, get them off of dirty coal, the Conservatives seem to be against that too. We know they don't believe in climate change. We know they don't care about reducing emissions, but we also now know that they don't care about the rigor of committee and using tools like a 1064 effectively. We have no problem with any of these meetings. I think a briefing, in-camera briefing from officials from ISED would benefit us all. We could probably do that first and then decide afterwards if further meetings are warranted, Mr. Speaker. But this alarmist approach and lack of collaboration is really disappointing. Thanks.
Oui, bon, alors j'aimerais dire...
So I would like to say something to my colleague on the other side. All opposition parties did approve the 1064. We signed it. Maybe there's another way to get to the end point. I am not a specialist, but we did sign on. It's a question of transparency, because $8 billion is a lot of money. With regards to the confidentiality, we are MPs. There are people who come to our offices and share a lot of confidential information that we don't divulge. There's a question of trust that comes with our role. Who decides what is confidential and what won't be confidential? That's a question that we can bring up. I think that it is right for us to ask for more transparency. There is money that is being invested in order to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and we want to know how it's going to do that. I'd like to get back to the question of confidentiality. The Prime Minister talked about the foreign interference and said, oh, yes, you can have secret meetings on security. And if that's possible, well, then secret meetings can be held here to talk about contracts. And I think that we need to trust our professionalism.
Mr. Vancouver.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleague. I know that all parties signed the 1064. And like I said, here we are at the next meeting, talking about it. This is how it can work if we work together. This is not an emergency meeting. An emergency meeting is not required for this. Like I said, it's a complete misuse of resources. And I agree. We can absolutely have meetings about this, and it would be great just to collaborate rather than, suggesting that there's some sort of urgency. We can have a meeting about this anytime. But to suggest that the information wasn't delivered, as Mr. Mazur pointed out, that's misleading. It was delivered. I went through the 25-page document with him at his desk in the House of Commons. I sat with him and said, Mr. Mazur, have you received the documents from ISED? And he said, yes, I have. I'm reading them right now. I said, good. I'm reading them too. No, I had them in my inbox.
You hadn't had a look at them.
I hadn't received
them.
Thanks.
That's what you told me, but anyways, for the record.
Yeah.
Cross-table discussion.
What I said was that I received.
I will be the last time you come.
We'll let Mr. Vancouver. I'll
did.
pause the meeting if I can't get a cooperation. But we'll let Mr. Vancouver finish. We'll go to Mr. Leslie, Ms. Idlout. Mr. Mazur, did you want to get on? Are you signaling? Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Mazur makes a good point that before I even opened the document, I sat with him at his desk to ensure that he received the documents.
For correction, clarification,
you stood over
You can point of order me if you want.
It's not a point of order, whether you're standing or sitting in the House. Okay, so go ahead.
On our side.
Thanks. I didn't need to visit Mr. Mazur at his desk. I didn't need to ask him if he had received the documents in question, but I did because I wanted to make sure he did, because I collaborate on this committee, because I want to work with everybody. And indeed, he received the documents in time, and after that, I went and reviewed them myself. It's a lot. It's like 4 different documents that are between 5 and 8 pages each. There's a lot of information in there, and I've reviewed it as well. There's way more information in those documents than there was in the initial press releases. But look, this government didn't invent cabinet confidence. Transparent by default doesn't mean that we're going to divulge confidential information about how these programs and things are negotiated with big companies that want to remain competitive in a global economic environment. And you're right, as MPs, we are entitled to more information than should be or could be divulged to the general public. And if we wanted a confidential arranged meeting here with officials to discuss some of those numbers, then we could do it in camera. That these meetings are broadcast to the public, as they should be. So again, this isn't an emergency. It's something that we could look into if we'd like. I personally am very, very supportive of investing in technology and innovation with large businesses, particularly those who are large emitters. I don't see any point in sending $400 million to an organization that doesn't do any emitting if we're looking to lower emissions.
He did that.
Mr. Mazur, it's my turn to speak, okay? Like, I'm here on your time because you would like to have an emergency meeting about this. So I'm going to finish my statement, which is I'm happy to have another meeting. That's totally fine. But suggesting this is an emergency or we're withholding something is completely beyond the pale and a misuse of parliamentary resources.
let my NDP colleague go first just because they haven't spoken yet. If
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I've been given a very quick briefing from Laurel staff, which I'm very thankful for. And having read Mr. Major's motion, notice of motion, it is reasonable given what was learned and not shared. And understanding that there was a 106.4 letter written on May 31, to me, that's an acknowledgement of a failure of this government to make sure that information that would help this committee make informed decisions about recommendations that need to be made on a report to this is important. Given as well that I understand that there was sensitive, the response of the government is that there's sensitive business information that will the NDP support this motion. Maybe we could amend it so that there's 1 hour of a public session and 1 hour of in camera, so that if there are information that needs to be considered that's more confidential, then it maybe can be discussed in
So you're
in camera.
proposing an amendment that would, the motion here, I've got it in front of me. You have the text, yeah, so you have the text of the motion, yeah.
Just
So
a minor
amendment. So you're proposing an amendment, Ms.
Yes.
Idlout? So
So-
where would you put it?
1, 2, 3, 4, right after at 15:30, where it says no less than 2 hours.
Okay,
Maybe it
no
could-
less than 2 hours. Could we put you're a lawyer, I know, I'm not, but could we put a comma after hours and say one of
hour.
which would be in camera?
Yes, and 1 hour is
Yeah,
public.
one of which, one hour, one of which would be
in camera.
would be in camera, semicolon, blah, blah, and then we continue. Okay, that's the amendment on the floor. Brief recess, and then we'll go to well, we've got Mr. Leslie, okay, so now we're on the amendment. We have Madame Posé on the amendment, but we're going to have a brief recess first. Madame Posé, who is going to speak on the amendment, and the amendment is to add a comma after no less than 2 hours, so no less than 2 hours, comma, one of which would be in camera, semicolon. That's the amendment.
Non, je pense que c'est plutôt...
Actually, I believe Ms. Idlout will propose a change.
You want to withdraw the amendment? Do we have UC to withdraw the amendment? Looks like we do. Okay, so you have another amendment, is that it? Are you saying you want to propose another amendment? Oh, Mr. Leslie wants to propose another amendment. Is that right?
Yes, that is
Okay,
correct.
okay. Yeah, because you were on the list, so, okay, go ahead.
I don't know if it goes back to me just on the
Yeah, it goes
original
back to
list,
you
or-
to the list, but you're going to use that time to propose an
Okay.
amendment.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that we are running short on time, and we had a lot of conversations between parties during the suspension there, and I think that there is a number of reasonable questions that we can ask officials that certainly should be in public, understanding that there are sensitive parts of the document, but I think understanding what those sensitive parts of both the contracts, what cabinet confidences might possibly have to do with a target for this program in terms of reducing emissions, as well as a number of other pieces out of what was a lengthy document, but ultimately did not respond to the three pieces of the initial request. So I would like to move the following amendment to change the motion put forward by Mr. Mazur. And it will begin with a change in language on the fifth line following the bullet points, immediately following for no less than 2 hours by adding with 1 hour in public, followed by 1 hour in camera. Further down in the same paragraph.
By 1 hour in camera, okay.
Further down within the same paragraph on line 10, immediately following the words for the net zero accelerator, amending it to add to be viewed by the committee and their staff as long as required.
No, you're going too fast for me.
Sorry.
Okay, so is this one amendment or two? Do we can vote on both together?
All one amendments, Mr. Chair.
Oh, one amendment, okay. Okay, so for the net zero accelerator, oh, this is great, it's in writing, very good, appreciate that. To be viewed by the committee
and their staff as long as required by members of the committee at least 3 days in advance of the meeting on June 11th. Continuing the amendment 2 lines further down, immediately following the words zero accelerators progress and results, amended by adding to be viewed by the committee and their staff as long as required by members of the committee, at least.
Well, you don't say that by members of the committee. You say as long as committee and staff, as long as required, comma, at least 3 days. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so you didn't say as required by members of the committee. So as required, comma, at least 3 days in advance of the
At
meeting.
least 3 days in advance of the meeting on June 11th, and the government provide public versions, i.e. redacted, of all documents ordered by the committee in advance in order to understand what the government is deeming commercially sensitive and protected.
Okay, so let me just pause for a second here. Okay, so that's the amendment on the table. I had actually Mr. Mazier was next. Well, no, now we're debating the amendment. So who wants to speak to that?
Maybe I could just make a couple of comments as to why I think this amendment is necessary. Obviously, there is a lot of questions that emerge. The reason that we are having this 106.4 meeting is a lack of clear response as requested by this committee from ISED. I know that there is some confusion regarding which department is the lead on this. However, this particular $8 billion program, it certainly falls under the mandate of the Environment Minister. We have been left with many unanswered questions questions. Obviously, as I mentioned, I understand the commercial sensitivities of the contracts. However, when looking through that response, it failed entirely, other than providing many words, but the entire thrust of what this committee was looking for. The tracker tool and the targets that are for some reason behind cabinet confidence. And I know that this government has said we've regularly allowed cabinet confidences to be released. That's largely only because it's come under investigation so many times as to why they were using it originally. We see, as it relates to the Auditor General report that came out today, similar double counting. I think at the end of the day, this is about $8 billion. Canadians, I think, were rightfully appalled when the Environment Commissioner highlighted that we don't know if there's value for money out of this program. This whole thing started because the Environment Commissioner brought forward very legitimate questions. And so I think it's entirely within the opposition's mandate, and in fact our primary function of government, to raise this as an important issue to provide transparency to Canadians as to whether or not there's value for money of this $8 billion fund that's ultimately supposed to be reducing emissions, and we have no evidence that it's actually doing that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Mazier.
I got nothing to add.
Nothing? Nobody has anything to add? You have something to add, Mr. Vancouver?
Yeah, I'm just concerned that the...
Just a point of order. Do we have resources? Have we checked into?
We're trying to get the resources. I would advise members to be taciturn if you want to get this through one way or the other, or we may end up...
That's why
anyway.
I said I had nothing to add.
Okay, so Mr. Vancouverden, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As discussed in our commercial break, we agreed collectively that there should be an in-camera session as the second hour of this meeting, where fully unredacted sheets and everything that was requested be viewed collectively. That was agreed upon, but it's not reflected in the amendment as I'm viewing it. So I'd propose a sub-amendment here. I'm also concerned that we agreed that the unredacted documents should be viewed in camera so that we can discuss them, analyze them. But then this amendment, as proposed, suggests that they should be sent out 3 days in advance and viewed by all parties. I don't personally want confidential documents to arrive in my inbox to be viewed by my staff. I prefer, frankly, to have confidential documents viewed in camera. That's what the point of an in-camera meeting is. I think the very premise that we have an in-camera session is that we can together review these unredacted documents. So I would like to propose a sub-amendment to ensure that the unredacted documents are viewed only in the second hour of this meeting, and that redacted documents go out 3 days prior, and that there just be some indication that the second hour of the meeting will be the section that's in camera.
Mr. Leslie. So on the amendment, so do you have a specific, sorry, just before we go to Mr. Leslie, do you have specific wording?
I asked for this this amendment during the commercial break. I didn't receive it until afterwards. So here we are on the fly with 1 minute left in the meeting trying to sub-amend. What I'm asking for is that redacted documents be sent out in advance and unredacted documents be viewed in the second half of the meeting, which will be in camera.
Sorry, that redacted documents be sent out in advance?
Yep.
And that unredacted documents be looked at in camera in the meeting?
Yes.
But I need like wording, because it's, I need like,
Okay. Well, it's 6:45. So.
Mr. Leslie, so we're talking about your amendment. We're back to your amendment. So
sure. No, I would like to. I wish I had the references in front of me. The Speaker has been extremely clear in previous rulings that this committee can ask for the production of any documents, and with that, I would like to call for a vote on the amendment. Oh, I didn't think you actually had.
No, you don't have it. It's not. In good order. Wasn't in good order.
It would be in good order if everybody was working together on this committee. However, that's not where we're at.
Yes.
Là, j'ai la traduction.
I do have the translation. It's so if I understand correctly, and I compare to the French, what it says is that the committee and its staff should be able to read the read the changes and not receive them. So it's not quite what Mr. Van Koeverden is fearing. That is indeed an interesting point. Here's what it might mean. The documents would be the documents that we wish to consult must be consulted in person in one location. Is that what you mean? The motion doesn't say that we have to receive them. It says that we have to have access to them. Indeed, that is very interesting. Here's what Ms. Posey is saying. We have nothing to fear because the amendment to the motion does not say that we have to distribute the document by email. It just says that we should have the right to consult the documents in question. And they would be sent to Environment Canada, and the members who want to consult them will have to go to the other side of will have to cross the bridge to go to the Environment Canada offices. Mr. Van Koeverden.
Well, what we discussed is that collectively we all kind of agreed in the commercial break that none of us really wanted to be in the position to have viewed confidential documents going into a question and answer period with officials. So I take the the observations that you made with Ms. Posey. So all I would ask, this is my sub amendment, that we basically just add the words in camera after Net Zero Accelerator be viewed by the committee and their staff in camera, as long as it is required by members.
Sorry, where would you do this?
So where it says the Net Zero Accelerator be viewed by the committee and their staff.
To be viewed by the committee, right? Yeah, and their staff.
Just add in camera, as long as required by members of the committee.
In
because
camera.
as you and Monique and Ms. Posey very rightly pointed out, doesn't say anything about emails, and that was my concern, is that we're going to start sending confidential documents around over email to staff and everybody.
Yeah, okay, so you're adding in camera. That's the
That's all.
sub-amendment.
We're just going to view them in camera.
Got it, okay.
Now I want to state I want to observe that we agreed that viewing these documents prior to the question and answer period with officials would require us to be very, very judicious in the questions that we ask, because nobody here wants to compromise.
Yeah, we don't want anybody to be called on a point of privilege, eh? So we have to be careful.
That was the reason why we might do the
okay.
viewing of the the confidential documents unredacted in camera afterwards.
No, but we don't seem
we're
to
not
have
doing
an
that
agreement.
anymore.
Yeah.
We agree that we're abandoning that section of this.
Okay.
So we're going to have to be very judicious.
Okay, so this is what we have to do.
And now we're going to do 2 in-camera sessions. I would also...
No. The documents will be somewhere in a room, in camera, in a room, and people can consult them. They're not going to be distributed by email. So people are going to go to a room if they want to consult the documents. We don't know where that room will be. I think we've got it here. If you give me a second. So what Mr. Van Koeverden's sub-amendment is to add, after to be viewed by the committee and their staff, to simply add the words in camera.
Oui, 2 fois.
Ou 2
Après
fois.
la même phrase.
Indeed, twice.
It happens twice.
Ah oui. OK, donc à 2 endroits. OK.
So in 2 places, we have to add the words in camera at 2 parts of this amendment. So if we accept the sub-amendment, just a moment. If we accept this sub-amendment, then we can vote on Mr. Leslie's amendment as amended.
Yeah.
A request, I guess, given that we are in public, and I hope that
I think we've got this, so let's
I'm not messing with the.
Yeah.
That's fine. We are in a committee of the House of Commons. I don't really want to go to the department across the river. I believe that they should have the documents available through our committee here within the House of Commons precinct.
Well, we could have them at the, wherever the committee secretariat is. I'm sure there's a little room where we can have the documents.
Your office.
Yeah, well, listen, my office if it has to be, but that's incidental, but I take your point. We shouldn't have to go across the river.
And could I just say, like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a politician.
Sorry, Mr. Vancouverden has the floor.
I would just like for somebody who knows how to do this stuff to maybe give us a little bit of training on what's allowed and what's not, so that we don't screw up.
What do you mean, what's allowed, what's not?
Like, what's cabinet confidence? Like, what types of questions should we ask and shouldn't we? Just like a little briefing, perhaps. And I'll do this on my own. If nobody else wants to do it, it's fine. I just think, we want to make sure.
I think what's clear is that any question that reveals something that is, well, quite frankly, anything that reveals anything in the documents, in a way, that cannot be, the premise of a question. So I think we have agreement. So can we vote on Mr. Vancouverden's sub-amendment to Mr. Leslie's amendment? We're good? Everybody's good with Mr.? Okay, add in camera twice. Now can we vote on Mr. Leslie's amendment as amended? Okay, we're good? Yes, we're good. Excellent. Can we adjourn?